case of Jenna Oakley. Jenna Oakley was born on March 2, 2001, in Indiana. She lived with her mother and 2-year-old brother in a troubled home. Due to her mother's neglect and inability to provide a stable life, Jenna often found herself left alone from a young age. The situation worsened over time, leading to intervention from Child Protective Services in April 2016. As a result, Jenna and her brother were removed from their mother's care and relocated to live with Philip Oakley, who their father and his wife, Rhonda, who was 52 years old at the time. Rhonda welcomed the children into her home and accepted them as her own. Philip later revealed that Rhonda had been eager to be a good mother to her stepchildren from the start. She welcomed them into her home with open arms and worked to create a safe and comfortable environment for them. Jenna was a difficult child to manage. Despite her academic success, which earned her praise from her teachers, she struggled to follow the rules in her new home. Her behavior became an even greater concern when her parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, whom she had met at the age of 10 while living with her mother in Indiana. Kenneth was a mysterious figure who seemed to be both a supportive influence and a hindrance in Jenna's life. To better understand the events that unfolded, it's essential to delve into Rhonda's story and explore the complexities of her personality as well as the significant impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Oakley was born on March 5, 1964, in Casey County, Kentucky to parents Howard Lee Raines and Mabel Walls Raines. She graduated from Casey County High School in 1982 and went on to work for 30 years in a prominent company that specialized in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Rhonda was a kind, loving, and cheerful person who was highly respected by her friends, who admired her warmth and kindness towards others. Rhonda met Philip Oakley on a golf course and they fell deeply in love. They decided to get married and start a new life together. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. At the time, Rhonda was divorced and had 4 children from her previous marriage. Philip and Rhonda's family were initially against their relationship due to their significant age difference. They asked Philip to end the relationship, which led to frequent arguments within the family. For that reason, Philip believed the relationship of Kenneth and Jenna was unacceptable because Kenneth was 5 years older than his daughter, Jenna. Philip even threatened to involve the police if Kenneth continued to date Jenna. To maintain control of the situation, Philip and Rhonda took measures such as confiscating Jenna's phone and computer and enforcing strict rules. The situation at home became so unbearable for she that she finally confided in her father and stepmother, promising to end her relationship with Kenneth. However, she failed to keep this promise and continued to secretly meet with him. As a result, her relationship with her parents deteriorated, and she began to harbor a deep-seated hatred towards her parents. On September 1, 2016, at around 4 p.m., David, her younger brother, returned home from school and entered the house. As he walked into the kitchen, he was startled by the sound of 3 of their dogs barking frantically in the basement. Curious, David rushed downstairs to investigate and found his mother, Rhonda, lying motionless on the floor. Panicked, David immediately ran outside to seek help and eventually went to a neighbor's house to call the police. When the emergency services arrived, they were unable to revive Rhonda, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The police found deep cuts on her neck, indicating a brutal attack. Initially, the police suspected a robbery, but upon further investigation, they discovered that nothing in the house had been stolen or disturbed. The investigation into Rhonda's death began, and her family and friends were left wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. As the investigation progressed, several key pieces of evidence came to light. Rhonda's car was discovered to be missing, and a trash can in the kitchen was found to contain vomit. Furthermore, one of the large meat cleavers from the kitchen was found to be missing, leading investigators to suspect that it may have been the weapon used to attack Rhonda. When Philip returned home, he was questioned by detectives and informed them that his daughter, Jenna, had not attended school that day. In fact, Jenna had been unreachable since the incident, and her teachers had called Philip early in the morning to report her absence. This led the police to believe that Jenna may have been kidnapped by the same individuals who killed Rhonda, and that she may be in danger. During the questioning, detectives asked Philip if he knew of anyone who might have wanted to harm Rhonda or the family. Philip revealed that his daughter's boyfriend, Kenneth, had a troubled relationship with Jenna and that it had deteriorated significantly. Philip admitted that he had threatened to contact the police if Kenneth did not stop seeing Jenna. Philip suspected that his daughter had been dishonest with him and that she and Kenneth had never intended to break up or follow the rules. It was possible that Kenneth had planned to get rid of the source of his problems and take Jenna with him. After learning this, the police focused their efforts on finding Kenneth. They discovered that on August 31st, the day before the incident, Kenneth had flown from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky, at 3 a.m. From there, he took a taxi to Oakley's house. Another crucial piece of evidence came from a store manager in Denver, who claimed to have seen Jenna with a young man on September 1st. The manager handed over surveillance footage to the police, which showed Jenna and Kenneth entering the store and then leaving together to get into a car that looked like Rhonda's stolen vehicle. Notably, Jenna appeared calm and normal in the footage, not showing any signs of distress or being coerced. Her behavior led investigators to dismiss the possibility that she was being held against her will and raised suspicions that she might be involved in a crime against her stepmother. A search of Jenna's room later revealed a diary that confirmed these suspicions. The diary exposed a deep-seated hatred that her family seemed to be unaware of. Jenna wrote about her ongoing feelings for Kenneth, with whom she had maintained contact despite promising to stay away. Interspersed with these entries were expressions of resentment towards her family members, which grew increasingly disturbing over time. Jenna wrote in her diary that she intended to kill her father, stepmother, and brother to prevent them from ever separating her from Kenneth again, allowing her to be with him without interference. She outlined a specific plan and timeline to carry out these actions. When her father, Philip, read her words, he was overcome with shock and fainted. He struggled to comprehend that his daughter would not only conceive of such a heinous act, but also possessed the determination to make it a reality. Jenna had a plan to kill her family members. First, she intended to kill her father between 4 o'clock and 5 a.m. by luring him to the basement and stabbing him in the neck. Her next target was Rhonda, whom she planned to kill in her bedroom between 6 o'clock and 8 a.m. using the same knife. After that, she planned to kill her brother David in his room. The police discovered Jenna's diary at the start of their investigation, which became the primary evidence against her. Meanwhile, Philip gave the police Kenneth's phone number, allowing them to track and apprehend Kenneth and his girlfriend. On September 4th, 3 days after the crime, investigators located the fugitives in Tucumcari, New Mexico. The police informed local authorities about the case, who quickly located Rhonda's stolen car near a hotel where Kenneth and Jenna were staying. They were arrested and transported separately to a New Mexico detention center, awaiting extradition. However, a search of the car did not yield the weapon used in the attack on Rhonda. Kenneth chose not to face trial. He attempted to take his own life in his cell by hanging himself and wrote a letter. Officers found him and rushed him to the hospital, where he was in critical condition. In his letter, Kenneth claimed responsibility for the crime and stated that he and Jenna acted according to his plan, attempting to take the blame to absolve her. The authorities kept Kenneth's attempt on his own life and his confession from Jenna for a time, deciding it was best she didn't know while being transported to Kentucky. They wanted her to give her own testimony without being influenced by Kenneth's actions. Upon arriving in Kentucky, Jenna also confessed to the crime, providing the police with a detailed account of her actions. According to Jenna, on the day before the crime, Kenneth visited her at her house. They met early in the morning, which is why Jenna didn't attend school that day. They spent the entire day together. Rhonda arrived home around 3 p.m. and encountered Kenneth in the basement. This encounter sparked an argument between Rhonda and Jenna, which eventually turned violent. The violence escalated to the point where Jenna attempted to strangle Rhonda by grabbing her neck. Kenneth then intervened, taking over from Jenna. He grasped Rhonda's throat with such force that she soon lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Once Rhonda was unconscious, Jenna took a kitchen knife and inflicted fatal wounds on her neck, leading to her death. Witnessing the scene caused Kenneth to become ill, and he vomited into a trash can. When questioned by the police about the knife used in the crime, Jenna stated that she and Kenneth had disposed of it during their escape. They had wrapped the knife in a bag and thrown it away at a fast food restaurant. Jenna provided this testimony while Kenneth was still in serious condition at the hospital. He was charged with first-degree murder but was unable to stand trial due to his self-inflicted injuries. After 6 weeks on life support, he passed away. In October 2019, Jenna was formally charged with her stepmother's death. The charges alleged she either caused the death or collaborated with someone else. She also faced a theft charge. Jenna was held without bail at a juvenile detention center. Her father, Philip, stated he didn't care that she was his daughter and felt she didn't deserve his protection after the incident. He hoped Jenna would receive the punishment she deserved. Jenna wasn't informed of Kenneth's death until a court hearing, where she fainted upon learning the news. After regaining consciousness, she screamed, cried, and struggled to calm down. In January 2019, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and expressed regret for her actions in court the following month. She expressed remorse for the pain, anger, and disappointment she caused. Upon learning of the plea deal, Philip expressed disappointment, stating that the system failed to prevent the crime against his wife. He claimed there were warning signs that Jenna was in trouble, but no one took action. Philip added that people often advise going to the police immediately, which he and his wife did, yet they still found themselves in a terrible situation. At the sentencing hearing in March, Susan Hooper, a mitigation specialist for the defense, explained that the defendant suffered from abuse, violence, neglect, and lack of basic human rights throughout her life. The lawyer questioned what could have driven a 15-year-old with no history of violence to commit such a crime. The lawyer noted that Jenna had no prior record, was respected by teachers and peers, and it was unclear what led her to take such a desperate step. It was also noted that none of Jenna's family attended the hearing. Philip declined to participate, and Jenna's mother never appeared in court to learn her daughter's fate. This was unusual, as parents typically show interest in the case's progress, even in difficult cases where the accused has committed serious crimes. The lawyer, Susan, gathered extensive evidence and records showing that Jenna was abandoned by her mother, Christa, who neglected her well-being. Susan conducted an in-depth examination of Jenna's early life by reviewing child care and medical records in Indiana and Kent. She also interviewed various individuals who knew Jenna, including neighbors, family friends, caregivers, teachers, school counselors, and her older half-sister. The sister's testimony was particularly relevant, as she had lived with Jenna for several years. According to the sister, they never had a stable or safe home environment. After Christ's divorce from Philip, she started working at a local Indiana prison, where she became romantically involved with an inmate. She eventually posted bail for him and he moved into their home. This marked the beginning of a nightmare for Jenna, who was only 3 years old at the time. The man consistently robbed them and brought other women into the house, all while Jenna and her brother were present. A neighbor contacted Child Services after discovering that Jenna's family home was infested with rats and that the young children were being left alone all day. When a social worker visited the home, she encountered a hostile mother who refused to let her inside. Upon eventually gaining entry, the social worker was met with a horrific scene. The house was filled with rotting food, piles of trash, rat droppings, and human waste. The kitchen was overrun with unwashed dishes, covered in mold and infested with rodents and insects, including a large number of cockroaches and fleas. The children were living in deplorable conditions with no regard for their safety. They had unrestricted access to medications and other hazardous substances, further endangering their well-being. Despite efforts to improve their situation, relocating Jenna and her younger brother to live with their father in Kentucky did not alleviate their problems. Susan stated that Philip and Rhonda neglected them, forcing Jenna to sleep in an unclean basement. However, the lawyer countered that Jenna had simply moved from one unstable home to another. Prosecutor Richie Borms presented evidence during the hearing, demonstrating that Philip made every effort to provide for the children's needs and create a good home. Despite the defense attorney's claims, Borms argued that if abuse or neglect had occurred, child care services would have been notified by Jenna's neighbors, friends, or teachers. Furthermore, the prosecutor inquired if the defense attorney was aware of Jenna's relationship with Kenneth and the fact that her parents disapproved of they. The defense attorney stated that Kenneth was the only person who genuinely cared for the accused, Jenna. According to the defense, Jenna's past experiences had left her with unmet emotional needs. She was searching for someone to provide her with the love and care she had always lacked, and having lost that person, she was now devastated. Defense attorney Anthony Lee Tainer presented scientific documents to justify Jenna's behavior. The articles explained how the child abuse Jenna suffered at a young age had negatively impacted her psychological development. Anthony told the court that his conversations with Jenna led him to believe that she lacked parental love and that her strained relationship with her mother contributed to her inappropriate relationship with Kenneth. Jenna supported the statement by reading a letter in which she expressed her deep regret and apologized to her family for her actions. She acknowledged the pain she had caused Rhonda's family and friends and claimed that she had since become a completely different person, distinct from the Jenna who committed the crime. When Philip stepped up to the podium, the atmosphere in the hall became tense. He and his daughter were visibly anxious about the impending conversation. Philip approached Jenna, looked her straight in the eye, and asked what had driven her to commit such a serious offense. He reminded her that as her father, he had always treated her with respect, and that Rhonda had never spoken ill of her or caused her harm. Philip explained that when they took Jenna in, it was to give her a better life, and that Rhonda had cared for her like her own daughter. However, Philip acknowledged that Jenna had been a challenging teenager and that he and Rhonda had discussed sending her to a specialized institution to help her get back on track. Philip also shared his concerns about Jenna's relationship with Kenneth, describing him as a predator who had taken advantage of his underage daughter. Philip revealed that when he discovered Jenna and Kenneth were still in contact despite he reported Kenneth to the police and warned him to stay away from Jenna, threatening legal action if necessary. Philip turned to his daughter, visibly shaken. He condemned her crime as unforgivable, citing Rhonda's exceptional character as a wonderful woman and mother unmatched by anyone. He emphasized how Jenna's actions had devastated not only Rhonda but also others. Philip then questioned why Jenna planned to harm him and her brother, arguing that she was not a victim, but rather someone influenced by circumstance. Despite this, he concluded by reaffirming his love for her, saying that regardless of her actions, she would always be his daughter. Jenna, overwhelmed, burst into tears, shouting at her father that she never felt part of the family and had never experienced his love. Following this outburst, the judge called for a recess to deliberate the verdict. On March 27, 2019, the verdict was announced. Jenna Oakley was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 10 years for first-degree murder and 5 years for car theft. She would be eligible for parole in February 1934. This case served as a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails, and those who commit heinous crimes will face their due punishment. 40 years ago, an American teenager was found bludgeoned to death in a cemetery in New Jersey. Her face was so badly injured that it was impossible to identify her at the time. The American public began to refer to her as Princess Doe, the Jane Doe who had died too young. For 4 decades, her real name has been a mystery until now. Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today's episode, I'm going to take you guys through the story of how Princess Doe was killed, how her identity was revealed, and how her killer was finally caught. Let's get right into it. Princess Doe was a previously unidentified American teenager from West Babylon, New York. She was found murdered in Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey on the July 15, 1982. Her face had been bludgeoned beyond recognition. Her case gained national attention, and the public took a special interest in unraveling her story and finding answers. She became the first unidentified dead body to be entered into the National Crime Information Center. On the morning of Thursday, July 15, 1982 at around 8 a.m., gravedigger George Keyes discovered the body of a young girl in the rear section of the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey. The body was found lying on its back just over a steep bank that leads to a creek below. The victim's face had been beaten beyond recognition with a yet-to-be-determined object. Due to the significant decomposition of her body, even her eye color could not be confirmed. The young girl was dressed in a red short-sleeve shirt. A peasant-style skirt was found lying on top of the victim's legs. No footwear or undergarments were found. No conclusive evidence was found, but this was difficult to determine because of how much the body was decayed. A golden cross necklace was found tangled in the victim's hair. 2 earrings were found in her left ear. Red nail polish was found on the right hand only, and she had no surgical scars, distinct birthmarks, or tattoos. Scars or marks on the head or face area could not be known due to the condition of the body. Forensic anthropologists determined that the victim was not pregnant and had never given birth, and was most likely between the ages of 18 and 14 years old at the time of her death. Toxicology did not reveal any traces of drugs, but was not entirely conclusive because of the time elapsed between the death and the discovery of the body. It is believed that the body was discovered after 2 to 3 days or possibly even weeks of exposure to the elements. This was especially difficult to determine because of the hot and humid weather in the area at that time. The forensic examination indicated that the girl had attempted to fight back or defend herself from her attacker, as injuries indicating trauma to her hands and arms were visible. The girl's body was buried in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery, not far from where she was discovered in January 1983. Donated funds were used to pay for the victim's coffin and headstone. The headstone was engraved with the text Princess Doe, missing from home, dead among strangers, remembered by all. For many years, Princess Doe was thought to be Diane Janisky, a missing teenager from San Jose, California who vanished on July 30, 1979. This theory was propagated by several law enforcement officials in the state of New Jersey, who went as far as to hold a press conference identifying Diane Guy as Princess Doe. However, Lieutenant Eric Krantz, the Princess Doe case's original lead investigator, maintained that Diane Guy was not a viable candidate for Princess Doe's identity. Krantz's feelings were shared by Diane's family and investigators in California who were particularly angered by the conduct of the New Jersey law enforcement. In February 2003, Princess Doe's DNA was compared with a DNA sample from Diane's mother, Patricia, and it was conclusively determined that Princess Doe was not Diane Guy. After seeing images of the girl's clothing in the newspaper, a witness named Anne-Marie Latimer reported to officials that she remembered seeing a girl wearing the same clothing as Princess Doe purchasing cigarettes on July 13, 1982, just 2 days before her body was found. Latimer stated that she was shopping with her daughter at a supermarket across from the cemetery and observed and was able to describe the victim's clothing. The shirt and skirt themselves were traced to a manufacturer in the Midwestern United States, although the brand labels were missing. 3 people reported after viewing the photos that they had bought similar clothes at a Long Island store, which is now closed. On September 22, 1999, the body of Princess Doe was exhumed from the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown so that DNA samples could be taken. The body was reburied in the same location. After a 2012 photo composite of the victim was released, it generated new tips as it resembled several missing girls from across the country. One theory was submitted that Princess Stone may have been a runaway and could have been an individual using false names while employed at a hotel in Ocean City, Maryland. In February 2012, a sample of her hair and a tooth were examined through isotope analysis and indicated that the victim was most likely born in the United States, at least 7 to 10 months in the Midwestern or Northeastern United States. The tooth sample indicated she could be from Arizona. It is also believed that the girl had spent a long time in Long Island, New York. Lieutenant Krams, now retired, coined the name Princess Doe early in the investigations and also managed to get the case covered extensively in the media. The case was used as the impetus for recording unidentified crime victims in the MCIC database at the national level. Princess Doe became the first such case entered by the FBI director. After extensive print media coverage in 1982, Lieutenant Krams, who was the original lead investigator from the Blairstown Police Department, was contacted by HBO regarding the Princess Doe case and asked if the channel could chronicle the case in an upcoming documentary entitled Missing. Krantz agreed, and the segment was filmed over several weeks. Krantz was shown following leads as they came in. The documentary featured actual footage of the recovery of Princess Doe's body, along with footage shot by HBO of Princess Doe's 1983 funeral. The case was also featured on America's Most Wanted in February 2012 in hopes of generating new information about the case. The same year, the most recent reconstruction was broadcast on CNN. On July 15, 2012, a memorial service was held for the 30th anniversary of Princess Doe being discovered at the top of the ravine where her remains were found. Over 100 citizens attended, as well as several reporters and cameras. The victim's clothing as well as her photo reconstructions were on display for public viewing. On October 12, 2014, Princess Doe was honored at a missing persons rally in the area. In the years between the first discovery in the body and the final identification, several theories cropped up. The first one was that Princess Doe was actually Diane Dye, a young girl missing from California, which has now been definitively disproved. Secondly, the killer of Princess Doe was already imprisoned for another homicide. A man called John Rees was briefly suspected as he was convicted of killing another woman in nearby Belvedere, New Jersey, but there was no real evidence of a connection with Princess Doe. The third theory was that Princess Doe was either a runaway that was known to work in the Ocean City, Maryland area, or a prostitute who worked at the local truck stop. The information for these two possibilities was highly inconclusive. Nobody from the local area came forward to identify Princess Doe on or off the record. It seems unlikely that not one single person would come forward if she was known in the area. The fourth and disturbing theory was that Princess Doe was killed by a Blairstown police officer, and that is why the case was never solved. But this claim is completely unsubstantiated. There are retired local law enforcement officers who still follow and contribute to the case even after 40 years. The fifth theory was that Princess Doe was a victim of a serial killer known to operate in the area, such as John Clyce, Henry Lee Lucas, or Joel Rifkin. Though local law enforcement was aware of these claims, none were found to be credible. A sixth theory was that Princess Doe was an out-of-state teenager who worked at an area camp. Again, this was never proven. And now we come to the seventh theory, that Princess Doe was killed by a man named Arthur Kinlaw. For many years, this was the most current theory. Many of the facts fit the case, and this theory was explored on the America's Most Wanted website. Several New York Newsday articles reference this theory that was published in 1999 and February. Mr. Kinlaw was already imprisoned for other crimes. But since Princess Doe's body wasn't identified, his involvement in her murder could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Princess Doe's body was re-exhumed in November 2020 using a grant, and she underwent DNA extraction for genetic genealogy. In May 2021, investigators were notified by the NCMEC, or National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who were collaborating with Astria Forensics about obtaining DNA markers from degraded samples of Princess Doe's body using a grant. On June 18, 2021, investigators received the news that Astria Forensic agreed to extract DNA and construct a DNA profile. On February 10, 2022, Astria Forensics relayed to investigators that the creation of a DNA data file was successful. The results were sent to the NCMEC's consulting genealogist from Innovative Forensics Investigations. The managing officer was Jennifer Moore, who agreed to perform unlimited genealogy testing free of charge. On February 22, 2022, Innovative Forensics announced to investigators that they had found a candidate for Princess Doe. Investigators went to West Battle on New York, where they met Robert Alagnac Jr., Princess Doe's brother. They also collected a DNA sample from Princess Doe's sister, which mitotyping technology used to build a mitochondrial DNA profile. The Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory assisted by creating an STR-DNA profile through the victim's sister's DNA sample. Mitotyping technology sent their results to the Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory, then sent both the mitochondrial DNA and STR-DNA profiles through the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. On April 29, 2022, the center identified Princess Doe as Dawn Alagnac. Her identity was formally announced on July 15, 2022, the 40th anniversary of her discovery. Robert Alagnac Jr. said that Alagnac left their home at her mother's request, and she was never seen or heard from again. Way back in 1999, evidence came to light that Arthur and Donna Kinlaw may have been involved in Princess Doe's murder. Donna was arrested in California for attempting to commit welfare fraud by using the name Eliana, which was traced to a Long Island native. When the police questioned her, she gave them details about the murder of Linda, and her testimony put the Kinlaws behind bars. Donna gave details about 2 murders Arthur had committed of 2 other female victims who remain unidentified today. After Arthur was faced with a death sentence, Donna told authorities that Kinlaw had killed another woman, a sex worker, earlier in 1982. She told police that she was with Arthur in the cemetery and witnessed him commit the murder. Another report states that Donna Kinlaw said that in July 1982, her husband brought home a teenage girl, left home, and returned without her. He later apparently disposed of his clothing and cleaned his vehicle. Afterward, he threatened his wife, claiming if she did not attend her job, he would take her life as he did to the girl he brought home. However, a lack of cooperation meant that Arthur Kinlaw was not charged. Lieutenant Stephen Spears, who worked on the case as a member of the Warren County Prosecutor's Office, from which he is now retired, stated that Kinlaw claimed responsibility for her death, but I have no physical evidence to confirm that. And without the identity of Princess Doe, I have no way of connecting the dots, so to speak, putting her in a place where he could have been or would have been at the same time. Spears also reported that he doubted the confession because the Kinlaws could not provide a name for Princess Doe, even though they claimed to have been with her for some time. Even though he questioned the credibility of their statements, Spears does not believe the victim was native to Long Island, New York. However, Donna Kinlaw was interviewed by a forensic artist who created a sketch of the girl she claimed to have met, which does resemble the most recent composite. Arthur Kinlaw remained incarcerated for 2 counts of second-degree murder. Following the 2022 investigation of Princess Doe as Don Olenek, Arthur Kinlaw was reconsidered as a suspect and later charged with Olenek's murder. Dawn Olenek was born on August 5, 1964. She had been a junior at Connequot High School in Bohemia, New York, where she had lived with her mother and sister, authorities said, but she soon moved out of the family home. According to her brother, she was thrown out of her home by her mom. She ended up getting killed in a cemetery, leaving no clue as to her real identity. But for more than 20 years, the name of her suspected killer was no secret. In 1999, the wife of Arthur Kinlaw, the convicted pimp who today is serving time for the murder of many other Long Island women, tied her husband not only to those deaths, but to the brutal slaying of the girl in the Blairstown Cemetery. In an interview with Newsday at the time, Donna Kinlaw recounted how her husband in the summer of 1982 brought a girl of about 18 years old back to their Central Islip home. She told the newspaper as well as police that her husband left with the woman, but later returned home alone, appearing shaken. About 2 weeks later, according to Newsday, she read that police in Belvedere, New Jersey had found the body of a dead girl who fit the description of the girl who was in their house that night. He kept saying, "What does it say? What does it say? Does it say who the person was who got killed?" She said her husband asked. From the story she read aloud to her husband, Donna Kinlaw told Newsday that she remembered that the New Jersey police named the dead girl Princess Jane Doe. Not long afterward, investigators exhumed her body to recover the murder victim's femur bone in hopes of using her DNA to identify her. And in fact, investigators acknowledged that Arthur Kinlaw confessed to the New Jersey murder in written statements dating back to February 2005. But it was not until April of this year that Don Olenek was positively identified. Arthur Kinlaw, now 68, is currently imprisoned in Sullivan County, New York on 2 other first-degree murder convictions from February. Among them was a teenager he knew only as Linda in April 1984 in the Bronx, Newsday reported. "I strangled her with my hand," said Kinlaw. "She was hit about the head by me with a bat." Arthur Kinlaw has now been charged with 1 count of homicide as the result of the subsequent investigation, witness statements, and his confession of Olenek's murder. It is believed that after Don Olenek refused his demands to go into prostitution, he drove her to New Jersey. They both ended up in Blairstown, where Kinlaw murdered her in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery. Neither Olenek nor Kinlaw had a connection with the town. Kinlaw remains imprisoned at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. Investigators are now looking to piece together Dawn Olegnac's movements in the time leading up to her death. The DNA Doe Project, also DNA Doe Project Incorporated or DDP, is an American nonprofit volunteer organization formed to identify unidentified deceased persons, or commonly known as John or Jane Doe, by using forensic genealogy. Their volunteers identified victims of automobile accidents, homicides, and unusual circumstances, such as persons who committed suicide under an alias. The group was founded in February 2017 by Colleen Fitzpatrick and Margaret Press. Unraveling the mystery of Princess Doe has been a sensational success for genealogical DNA testing of exactly this kind. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest impact. And for the case of Princess Doe, that was exactly what happened. A molar root weighing just 200 kilograms would hold the answers that had eluded investigators for close to 40 years. With the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Princess Doe's molar and eyelash were submitted to Astria Forensics in 2021 for possible DNA extraction. What is so special about Astria is that they can extract DNA from samples that are degraded or otherwise would provide no value, said Carol Schweitzer, a forensic supervisor at NCMEC. We knew that if anyone could get the information that was needed, Astria could, and they did. Kelly Kincaid, CEO of Astria Forensics, told NCMEC that they were lucky to find that the DNA was exceptionally well preserved and allowed for millions of pieces of information to be gathered to complete a DNA profile. This single DNA extract contained hundreds of millions of unique human DNA fragments, said Kelly. With these sequencing data, we were able to reconstruct her whole genome single nucleotide polymorphisms or SMP profile. This resulted in Astria being able to deliver genotype files to NCMEC and the Warren County Prosecutor's Office that could go on and be used to complete Princess Doe's genealogy. This technology that would not have been possible 40 years ago was just the break the investigators had been hoping for to identify Princess Doe's identity. Once Astria finished the sequencing, Innovative Forensic Investigations, or IFI, started to work on investigative genetic genealogy techniques to build a family tree that would ultimately lead to the true identity of Princess Doe, or who we now know as Dawn Olegnec. This work was only possible because of the collaborative effort of each agency, said Jennifer Moore, CEO of IFI. Our team brings forward a diverse set of skills that allows us to help find answers to cases. Echoing Moore's sentiment in today's press conference, Prosecutor Pfeiffer reiterated that science and technology made the impossible possible in this case. Dawn's case was deeply personal for the investigators involved, and their push for answers and justice never wavered. Dawn's family expressed deep gratitude to everyone who worked to find answers in Dawn's case. "This is a very big deal for my family," said Dawn's cousin. "I'd like to thank Blair staff for treating my cousin like she was one of their own. Touches our family deeply. My cousin is always in my heart," he said while tapping the photo of Dawn pinned to his chest. Blairstown. David Tarawona gave up. "We were greatly appreciative of that." Since Princess Doe was the first unidentified persons case to be entered into NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, by the director of the FBI, William Webster, on June 30, 1983, this was a historic moment for missing and unidentified persons that has continued to play a crucial role in investigations since. The entry in NCIC has remained current and alive until today, when she will be removed. The tenacity of law enforcement has never stopped, and they continue to pour resources and new technology into solving this case. And it's thanks to the collaboration between police authorities and genealogical DNA testing experts that Princess Doe was publicly identified on the 40th anniversary of the discovery of her body as Dawn Olegnec. So what do you guys think about this 40-year-old case finally getting resolved? Do you still have any theories about Princess Doe? Let us know in the comments section. The case of Jassie Correa. Jassie Correa was born in Praia, Cabo Verde, but her family moved to the United States when she was just 3 years old. She grew up in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and Boston became her hometown. As she grew older, Jassie became a loving mother to her daughter, Gabriella. However, Jassie's personal life was marred by difficulties. Jassie's husband, Miguel Castro, physically attacked her. Despite wanting to leave him, Miguel refused to let her go and severely beat her. Jassie eventually reported the incident to the police, and Miguel was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Jassie worked as a waitress at Del Frisco, a Boston restaurant. In her free time, she enjoyed dancing and photography. She cherished moments spent with her family, friends, and daughter, Gabriella. One of her favorite activities was taking her little daughter to the park. On the evening of February 23, 2019, Jassie celebrated her birthday with friends at Venue, a nightclub in Boston's Dieter district. Before heading out, she left her 2-year-old daughter with her family and got ready for a night out, wearing a new orange jumpsuit. They had spent the evening dancing and drinking champagne at a nightclub. When the club closed, Jassie and her 2 friends stepped outside, but they eventually went their separate ways, leaving Jassie alone. She never made it home that night, and her phone was turned off with all calls going straight to voicemail. For 2 days, Sunday and Monday, there was no news from Jassie. No one had seen her since she left the nightclub on Sunday morning. On Tuesday, February 26th, Jassie's father, Korea, and one of Jassie's friends went to the police station to report her disappearance. The police immediately launched an investigation. The detectives' first priority was to determine where Jassie went after leaving the nightclub. Jassie's family and friends distributed flyers around the city, hoping someone might have information about her whereabouts. The detectives also interviewed Jassie's friends who were with her that night, but they didn't know where she had gone after leaving the club. According to her friends, Jassie had planned to head home after saying goodbye. To gather more information, the police interviewed witnesses and reviewed CCTV footage from cameras inside and outside the nightclub. One recording showed Jassie on the sidewalk on Tremont Street, near the nightclub, talking to several people at 2:14 a.m. This was after she had left the club. The footage revealed that Jassie, who appeared to be intoxicated, mistakenly got into an Uber she hadn't ordered. The driver, unhappy about the mix-up, argued with her and eventually pushed her out of the vehicle. After being forced out of the car, Jassie continued to argue with the driver. That's when an unknown man approached her and took her hand, pulling her aside to talk. Despite possibly wanting to leave, Jassie was unable to free herself from his grasp. The CCTV footage showed the man, still holding Jassie's hands, pulling her closer. Eventually, Jassie left the area with him. In hindsight, it's clear that she had fallen prey to a predator who took advantage of her vulnerable state. The next camera footage showed Jassie jumping onto his back, and he carried her to his car. They drove away together. 14 minutes later, the police had many questions to answer. Who was this man and where had he taken Jassie? Fortunately, they quickly identified the man and located his address. Louis Coleman, a 32-year-old man from a good family background, was with Jassie at the time of the incident. He had earned a master's degree in physics and had no prior record with the law. Notably, there was no information in the police database about Louis owning a car. However, his mother, a resident of California, was the owner of a 2016 red Buick, which matched the type of vehicle involved in the incident with Jassie. Louis lived in Providence, Rhode Island, about 50 miles from the Venue nightclub where he was last seen with Jassie. When police arrived at his home, they found that Louis was no longer there. However, CCTV footage from inside and outside the building revealed disturbing evidence. It's worth noting that the drive from the Venue club to Louis's apartment typically, since Louis returned to his apartment at 4:15 a.m. On Sunday, approximately 2 hours after he was seen leaving with Jassie, it's likely that he stopped somewhere along the way. The next day, Louis sent an email to his colleagues stating that he would be taking a few more days off. Based on the content of the email, it appears that Louis was trying to buy time to cover his tracks. Over the next 2 days, Louis attempted to conceal evidence of the crime. Further CCTV footage analysis sheds light on what happened to Jassie after she left with Louis. Although the police never released the initial footage due to ethical concerns, it showed Louis entering his apartment building with Jassie. FBI Special Agent Thomas Zuckus described the footage as follows. Louis was seen walking from a red sedan towards the front of the building, carrying a body with long hair and orange pants. Agent Zuckus believes that this footage shows Louis carrying Jassie's body into his apartment building. According to Zuckus, Security footage from the building's lobby reveals that at approximately 4:27 a.m., Lewis entered the building carrying an unconscious or already deceased Jassie in his arms. He proceeded to the elevator and took it to the 6th floor. Notably, on February 26th, the same day Jassie's father reported her disappearance to the police, Lewis made a suspicious purchase at Walmart. His receipt shows he bought multiple items that raise red flags, including protective suits, duct tape, electrical tape, candles, gloves, safety goggles, a mask, and Clorox bleach. The next day, while friends and family distributed flyers with Jassie's picture, Luis made another concerning purchase at Walmart caught on camera at 9:22 p.m. This time, he bought a large suitcase and a canister. On February 27, 2019, at around 9:58 p.m., Lewis returned to the apartment building, and video footage appears to show him carrying the newly purchased large suitcase. Further footage captures Lewis taking the suitcase from his apartment to his vehicle in the parking lot, as evidenced by a recording at 2:15 a.m. on February 28. A video shows a man, later identified as Lewis, struggling to lift a suitcase into the trunk of his car. This footage is part of a larger investigation into the disappearance of Jassie Correa, who was last seen on February 24th and was believed to be at Lewis's apartment. Between 2:44 a.m. and 4:02 a.m., Lewis was seen leaving the building multiple times, carrying various items including cardboard boxes, trash bags, a bottle of bleach, a computer tower, a laptop case, and a small duffel bag. On February 28, 2019, police obtained a search warrant for Lewis's apartment. During their search, they found several suspicious items, including 2 packages of hooded coveralls and 2 respirator masks. They also examined a sofa in the apartment, which was missing one of its 4 large cushions. Outside the apartment complex, in a dumpster, police found a collection of items that raised further suspicions. These included white trash bags, a bag containing plastic sheets, men's jeans with bleach stains, and the belt. Additional items found in the dumpster included a white nylon hooded coverall, an unfilled box of baking soda, clear safety goggles, duct tape packaging, rubbing alcohol, Walmart bags, used plastic gloves, an empty package from a car air freshener, 3 used packages of purifying charcoal, and a sponge. On the afternoon of February 28, 2019, police stopped a car driven by Lewis near Wilmington, Delaware. Officers ordered Lewis to exit the vehicle and asked if he was alone. Lewis reportedly responded by saying, "She's in the trunk." When police investigated, they found the body of Jassie wrapped in a sofa cushion cover inside a black trash bag, which was placed in a large suitcase that matched the one Lewis had taken into his apartment the previous day. Experts who inspected the car found 2 cracks on the passenger side windshield, leading police to suspect that the man had attacked Jassie inside the vehicle. As a result, Lewis was arrested and taken to a Delaware State Police barracks. During questioning, Lewis had a large bandage on the right side of his face, which he claimed was from sheep when asked about it. A forensic examination revealed that Jassie died from a combination of strangulation and blunt force trauma. Additionally, seminal fluid was found on her body, and DNA analysis matched Lewis's DNA. Prosecutors noted that Lewis's DNA was also found under Jassie's fingertips. Although the exact location of Jassie's death could not be determined, it is believed to have occurred either in the car or at Lewis's apartment. On Saturday, March 9, 2019, family and community members gathered at St. Peter's Parish in Dorchester to pay their respects to Jassie Correa. Many wore white or displayed buttons, shirts, and sweatshirts with Jassie's face and the phrase "Justice for Jassie." Maca de Andrade, Jassie's cousin and best friend, delivered the first eulogy, expressing the community's sadness and acceptance of Jassie's passing. DeAndrade said, "We may not understand why Jassie's life was cut short, but I have faith that her death was not in vain. I trust that God has a plan, and I have faith in that." Boston Mayor Marty Walsh addressed the crowd, vowing to work towards creating a safer world for women. He emphasized that young women should be able to go out and celebrate without fear and return home safely to their loved ones. He acknowledged the immense pain Jassie Correa's family has endured and expressed his condolences. When Correa expressed gratitude to the city and law enforcement agencies for for their tireless efforts in investigating Jassie's disappearance and death. He also paid a heartfelt tribute to his daughter, saying, "Rest in paradise, my dear Jassie. Rest in peace, my dear child." Lewis Coleman, the suspect, has been charged with kidnapping resulting in death, a crime that could carry the death penalty or a life sentence. However, prosecutors have announced that they will not seek capital punishment. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence, including a video of Coleman dragging Jassie's body into his apartment and his online search history following her disappearance. FBI agents reported on Lewis's online activity in the days following the alleged kidnapping. He searched for topics such as whether a person can fit inside a suitcase and how to remove a tooth that is not loose. However, Lewis's defense team has disputed the relevance of this evidence to the kidnapping charge. They argue that the prosecution's focus has been on Lewis's actions after the alleged victim's death, rather than on the kidnapping itself. Attorney David stated, "This case is not about how Lewis behaved after her death, or whether he did anything illegal or inappropriate. The government's evidence has mainly centered on these issues, but I believe they are not crucial to determining whether a kidnapping occurred." Court documents filed by the prosecution and defense provide a detailed account of the events surrounding Jassie Korea's disappearance and death. Although they sides present different versions of what happened, the documents reveal disturbing details about the circumstances leading up to Jassie's death. Prosecutors established that the defendant, Lewis, was at the same nightclub as Jassie and her friends on the night of her disappearance. However, Lewis was interacting with a different woman he had just met, not Jassie. They exchanged phone numbers and texted each other while at the club and after it closed. The prosecution and defense have presented conflicting narratives about the events that unfolded. Prosecutors argue that Jassie was not the aggressor and that Lewis deceived her into getting into his car by offering her a ride to her friend's apartment, ultimately taking her life. In contrast, the defense claims that Jassie became aggressive after being pushed out of an Uber by the driver and that she initiated a fight with Lewis. The defense argues that the crime was a spontaneous altercation rather than a premeditated act of stalking, kidnapping, and murder. Prosecutors pointed out that the defendant's main argument was that the victim, who weighed 119 pounds, had attacked the defendant, who weighed 200 pounds. However, this claim was not convincing, especially considering that the victim's autopsy revealed the presence of multiple prohibited substances in her body, in addition to alcohol. The defense team attempted to minimize their client's involvement in the crime. Despite this, in June 2022, Lewis was found guilty of one count of kidnapping resulting in death. The defense team then filed a motion arguing that the evidence was insufficient to support the conviction, but this motion did not change the outcome of the trial. In October 2022, Lewis Coleman, 36, was sentenced to life in prison without parole for kidnapping and killing Jassie Korea. The court also ordered him to pay $60,000 in compensation to the victim's family. The case of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. Grant Hendrickson, born on September 20, 1972, in Macon, Georgia, was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed fishing, golf, canoeing, and camping. Like his girlfriend, he was also an active volunteer in the community, having worked at the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon since the age of 15. Their active lifestyles likely drew them together, according to those who knew them. Grant's girlfriend, Michelle Cartagena, was born on May 2, 1975, in Monterey, California. She was a well-rounded and talented individual. She played in her school's marching orchestra band, was the top singles tennis player, and led her school's softball team. Additionally, she was a member of the National Honor Society. Outside of school, Michelle volunteered with the Red Cross and an animal welfare association, and she often visited elderly people. Her father remembered her as a caring and driven individual who aimed to pursue a career in medicine to help others and give back to society. January 3, 1995, brought a grim discovery to the typically quiet area of Juliet Lake. A passerby reported finding two lifeless bodies while walking near the lake. The local sheriff and his deputy responded to the scene, where they were met with a shocking sight. Their office was not accustomed to handling serious crimes, as fights and thefts were the norm. The deputies were not prepared for what they found. A white Honda parked on the lake's shore, with the body of a man inside and her body lying on the ground nearby. The cause of death was evident, even to a non-expert. Both victims had been shot. The car contained the victims' personal belongings, including identification, which revealed the identities of the victims. The male victim was 22-year-old Grant Hendrickson, who was found in the driver's seat. The second victim was 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena. The police were alerted to the incident, and officers from the Major Crimes Unit, along with forensic experts, arrived at the lake. The detectives' attention was immediately drawn to Michelle's body, which was partially exposed with her skirt pulled up, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. An examination of the car revealed bullet holes, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator had opened fire on them while they were inside. Grant was hit by 3 bullets and had no chance of survival. Michelle was shot twice and likely remained conscious as the perpetrator pulled her from the car. The position of Michelle's body, with her legs spread apart, suggested that the perpetrator may have intended to take advantage of her vulnerable state, but did not do so. Forensic experts found a substance on the inside of her thighs, which was later identified as saliva containing chewing tobacco particles. The saliva samples were sent to the lab for further analysis. During the crime scene investigation, police discovered important evidence, including bullet casings of 2 different calibers, 13.223 caliber casings and 4.9mm casings. The presence of 2 types of ammunition suggests that there may have been 2 perpetrators, each using a different weapon. The families of Grant and Michelle were shocked and stunned when they learned about the tragedy. They struggled to comprehend who could have committed such a heinous act against their children. As only children, Grant and Michelle were extremely close to their parents. They had been dating for over a year and had already made plans for their future together, including their upcoming wedding. When detectives couldn't identify any enemies or suspects through family and friends, they began investigating further. They visited Mercer University in Macon, where Grant and Michelle were classmates, to gather more information and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. The police investigation into the deaths of Michelle and Grant was ongoing, but they had not uncovered any significant leads. Both victims were well-liked and respected at the university, with no known conflicts or enemies. Initially, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have been a man who had romantic feelings for Michelle and was rejected, but this theory was not substantiated and was eventually set aside. A visit to Mercer University did not yield any useful information for the police. However, by reconstructing the events of January 2nd, the detectives learned that Michelle and Grant had gone to a restaurant, followed by a movie. After the film, they headed to a holiday camp at Juliet Lake. The camp was open to the public 24/7 and featured a boat launch, parking area, small dock, and picnic tables. Since it was a free public space, there was no staff or security present on the night of the crime. Other people were in the area, but they did not report anything suspicious. Some individuals did hear loud noises, which they initially dismissed as firecrackers. A witness reported seeing a 1980s Honda CRX speeding out of the parking lot. Meanwhile, investigators found a DNA sample in saliva on Michelle's thigh. However, at the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages. The DNA Identification Act, which allowed the FBI to create a national DNA database, was not passed until 1994. As a result, there was no database to compare the DNA sample to, and it could only be matched by directly comparing it to the perpetrator's DNA. The investigation also included questioning staff at the restaurant and cinema that Grant and Michelle visited before their deaths, but nothing suspicious was found. The authorities considered the possibility that they might have been random victims or had a chance encounter with someone who became violent. The detectives found no evidence of any other motives, as they had good grades, no connections to shady individuals, and did not use illicit substances. The fact that the perpetrator left behind valuables, including money, suggests that the motive behind the crime was not financial gain, but rather something else. Forensic analysis revealed that the likely weapons used in the crime were an AR-15 rifle and a 9mm Ruger pistol. Despite questioning over 100 individuals and collecting DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects, the investigation had stalled. More than a year and a half after the crime, Agent Randy Upton of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case in the fall of 1996. Randy adopted a new approach, shifting his focus from identifying the perpetrator to locating the weapon used in the crime. He visited the largest gun store in Macon and requested a list of customers who had purchased an AR-15 rifle between 1985 and 1995. Investigator Randy started contacting individuals on the list of 108 potential suspects. He explained to them that cooperating by allowing their weapon to be inspected and providing a DNA sample would greatly aid the investigation. Most of the people Randy spoke with agreed to comply, which led to the experts conducting further tests. As a result, the list of suspects began to dwindle. On November 27, 1996, Randy contacted Andrew Allen Cook, a 22-year-old who was on the list. During their conversation, Randy informed Andrew of the purpose of the call and asked permission to examine his rifle. However, Andrew claimed he no longer owned the rifle, stating that he had sold it in April 1994, nearly a year before the victims, Grant and Michelle, died. Nonetheless, gun store records showed that this was not possible, as Andrew had actually purchased the rifle in August 1994. Agent Randy became suspicious when Andrew lied to him. When Randy asked Andrew for a DNA sample, Andrew claimed he needed to discuss it with his father, simultaneously an FBI agent, before complying. Instead, Andrew hung up. This evasive behavior made Randy think that Andrew might be the person he was searching for. Investigations revealed that 5 months after Grant and Michelle's murders in 1995, Andrew pawned his rifle at a local gun store. Additionally, in December 1993, someone had bought a Ruger pistol on Andrew's behalf because he was underage at the time. Andrew sold this pistol to a friend in July 1995, shortly after pawning his rifle. This sequence of events suggested that Andrew's decision to get rid of both his rifle and pistol within 6 months of the murders was unlikely to be a coincidence. As the police gathered more information about Andrew, they became increasingly confident that they were on the right track. Further investigation revealed that Andrew had not only disposed of his firearms but also his 1987 Honda CRX, which matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. Agent Randy decided to visit the diaper factory where Andrew worked. Although Andrew was absent, Randy spoke with one of his co-workers. A colleague of Andrew's reported that they had recently discussed the worst things they had ever done, and Andrew claimed to have shot someone with a rifle. The colleague was skeptical but asked Andrew why he had done it, and Andrew replied that he wanted to see if he could get away with it. The colleague also mentioned that Andrew was a frequent user of chewing tobacco. Another friend testified that Andrew had told him in late November 1996 that he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. These coincidences caught the attention of Agent Randy, who began searching for Andrew Cook, who had not lived with his parents for several years. On December 4, 1996, Agent Randy met with Andrew's father, John, who was also an FBI agent with 29 years of experience. Agent Randy explained that he was investigating the crime at Juliet Lake and wanted to speak with Andrew, but couldn't find him. John was familiar with the case of Grant and Michelle from the news, but had not been involved in the investigation. He told Agent Randy that he didn't consider Andrew a suspect, but promised to find him and talk to him. Later that day, John was able to reach Andrew by phone. John Cook's world was turned upside down when his son, Andrew, revealed a shocking truth. A detective had been searching for Andrew in connection with a crime at Juliet Lake, and John had asked his son if he knew anything about it. Andrew's response was devastating. "Daddy, I'm not telling you. You're one of them, you're a cop." John's next question was laced with hope that his son would deny any involvement. "Were you the one who did the shooting?" he asked. After a brief pause, Andrew confirmed his worst fears, saying yes. Andrew explained that he had been fishing at Juliet Lake on the night of the incident. A couple had arrived, and he had gotten into an argument with the driver, Grant. According to Andrew, Grant had threatened him with a pistol, prompting Andrew to grab his rifle and commit an irreversible act. John urged his son to turn himself in to the authorities, but Andrew refused, saying he would rather disappear. John was stunned by his son's confession, but he maintained his professional composure. The next day, he visited the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and reported his son's confession. At the time, no one was aware that Andrew had been arrested earlier that morning in a nearby county for illegally hunting deer in Turkey. He had given a false name, but his true identity was quickly discovered by Agent Randy. Randy then traveled to Jones County to speak with Andrew. Unbeknownst to Randy, Andrew had already confessed everything to his father the day before. When Randy arrived at the Jones County Sheriff's Office, he introduced himself and asked Andrew if he would be willing to answer a few questions. Andrew responded, "It's been 2 years, and you still don't have any evidence. I used to own a Honda, a rifle, and a Ruger, but now you're just trying to frame me." Andrew told the sheriff that if they helped his father get a lawyer, he would reveal the entire truth. After being transferred to Monroe County, Andrew's father, John, was allowed a private conversation with him. When John hugged his son, both men broke down in tears. Andrew confessed to his father that he wasn't at the lake to fish on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed to have arrived after the victims, Grant and Michelle, were already there. Andrew's story went that he had fired multiple shots from his rifle, then used his pistol to fire additional shots. He then pulled Michelle's body out of the car in an attempt to mislead the police. As an extra precaution, Andrew spat on Michelle to prevent the police from linking him to the crime through saliva analysis. Andrew was subsequently charged with the murders of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. The police gathered additional evidence to support his confession, including tracing the ownership of the rifle and pistol used in the crime. Forensic examination of the guns confirmed that they were indeed the ones used to kill Michelle and Grant. Andrew Cook's DNA was matched to the saliva found on Michelle's body, further implicating him in the crime. The trial took place in 1998, during which John Andrew, Andrew's father, spoke and apologized to the families of the victims, Grant and Michelle. He acknowledged that his apologies would not bring them peace and expressed regret for not recognizing the evil that had consumed his son. Andrew Cook was found guilty on March 19, 1998, and was sentenced to death. He exhausted all his appeals, and the execution was scheduled for February 22, 2013. However, 3 days before the scheduled execution, Andrew's attorneys filed a clemency appeal, arguing that he was mentally unstable and required treatment. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles considered the appeal but ultimately voted against clemency. On February 22, Andrew Cook's family visited him in prison to bid their final farewell. Before his execution, he was granted the opportunity to choose his last meal, which consisted of a steak, baked potatoes, fried shrimp, lemon pie, and soda. As he lay strapped to a gurney in the death chamber, Andrew delivered his final words, expressing remorse for his actions. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive me, as I struggle to forgive myself." He then thanked his family for their unwavering support and apologized for the pain he had caused them, stating, "I'm sorry I took so much from you all." At 11:08 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. 14 minutes later, Andrew Cook, 38, was pronounced dead. Following the execution, Mary Hendrickson, the mother of one of the victims, expressed relief that justice had finally been served after 18 long years. The case of Christa Baker Alexander. Christa Ann Baker was born on November 27, 1983, in Laurel and Jones County, Mississippi, to Pastor Winfred Baker and Patty Ann Baker. She was the youngest of 3 children with 2 older brothers. When Christa was 8 years old, her family moved to Abota Springs, Louisiana, where they built a church and actively participated in its activities. Growing up, Christa traveled extensively with Christian missionary organizations to help those in need, particularly children. She was homeschooled and later pursued a degree in Christian education through online courses at the North Tennessee Bible Institute. Christa's passion was serving others, especially children, and she hoped to start her own family one day. However, her faith took priority, and she dreamed of finding a husband who shared her values. Christa adhered to traditional values and chose to save herself for marriage, only dating with the intention of finding a lifelong partner. During this time, she developed close friendships, including one with Cudy Alexander, a fellow youth pastor who shared her passion for missionary work. Cudy was a charismatic and well-liked individual in his community. Their families met through the church and maintained a good relationship. Cudy had been friends with Christa for many years before he asked her father, Winford Baker, for permission to marry her. Her father happily agreed. During their courtship, Cudy and Christa followed church traditions and refrained from intimate contact. Christa had even told her parents that she wanted to save her first kiss with Cudy for their wedding day. While Christa helped her parents at church, Cudy was pursuing a career as a paramedic. A year later, they decided to get married. On March 1st, 2008, they exchanged vows in front of their families and church members. The wedding was a joyful celebration, and Christa was a beautiful bride. However, their happiness was short-lived. Just 4 months after the wedding, tragedy struck. On June 29, 2008, Cudy returned home from a night shift at around 6 a.m. to find Christa lying face down on the floor. She was dead. Cudy immediately called the police. Christa's body was found near the front door, with no signs of a struggle. A bullet wound was discovered in the back of her head, with burn marks on her skin, indicating that the shot was fired at close range. The gunshot wound suggested that the gun was positioned at the back of Christa's head when the shot was fired. A 9mm shell casing was found on the floor next to her body. Initially, investigators thought the crime might have been a botched robbery. It was possible that someone broke into the house, assuming it was empty, and then killed Christa to avoid leaving a witness. Police had thoroughly searched the house. A jewelry box was found on the bed. The gun cabinet had been forced open, and Christa's purse was on the kitchen table, showing signs of having been rummaged through. Additionally, many drawers and cabinets were left open, suggesting that the perpetrator was looking for something of value. After completing their search of the house, police began interviewing individuals who had access to the property. Christa's husband, Cudy Alexander, was the first person they spoke with. However, he was too distraught to answer questions immediately, and investigators had to wait for him to compose himself. Once he was able to speak, Cudy reported that everything had seemed normal the previous night before he left for his overnight shift as an emergency medical technician with Caden Ambulance. He told that he called Christa multiple times throughout the night, but she didn't answer her phone. He also sent her several text messages, which she didn't respond to. Assuming she was just tired and had fallen asleep, he didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home the next morning, he was met with a disturbing scene. The front door was slightly open, and upon entering, he found their belongings scattered everywhere and Christa lying on the floor with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. He immediately checked her pulse and confirmed that she was dead. Panicked, he called 911 right away. The investigators were tasked with determining who could have entered the house while he was at work. It was possible that the perpetrator waited until Christa was alone before striking. They also explored the possibility that Christa may have let the killer into the house herself, as there were no signs of a struggle on her body or in the house. This suggested that she may have known her attacker and didn't feel threatened until it was too late. Cudy informed the investigators that a rifle and a shotgun were missing from the gun cabinet. What made the situation even more tragic was that Christa was 17 weeks pregnant, meaning that not only had he lost his wife, but also their unborn child. Cudy was overcome with grief and struggled to come to terms with the loss, unsure of how to move forward with his life. The case involved 2 victims, not one. The crime scene appeared unusual to investigators. The house was messy, but it didn't seem like the result of a typical burglary. Cabinets and drawers were open, but there was no evidence of rummaging or searching for specific items. It was as if the perpetrator wanted to mislead the police. The jewelry box was also open, but the jewelry was still intact, which raised suspicions. Christa's purse was open, yet all its valuable contents remained. The police noted that 2 firearms were missing from the house, but this was unusual because there were more firearms in the house that were not taken. This led investigators to wonder why the perpetrator didn't take all the available firearms. Based on these observations, investigators concluded that the crime scene was staged. It appeared that the perpetrator intended to kill Christa Alexander and then make it look like a robbery. As a result, the police began interviewing their neighbors to gather more information. This led to an unexpected lead in the case. Mathis Rabel, the 69-year-old neighbor and was landlord of the Alexanders, described they as quiet and recently married. They were active members of the Fundamental Baptist Church. Mavis remembered Christa Alexander as a kind and helpful woman who rarely went outside without her husband. Mavis last saw they on Saturday afternoon when Cudy Alexander was collecting the bodies of turtles he had shot in his backyard pond. This led investigators to discover that Cudy owned the gun. However, when police searched the Alexanders' home, they did not find a gun. Cudy claimed that only a rifle and a shotgun had been stolen from the house, but he never mentioned a handgun. Detectives suspected that Cudy might be hiding something. They searched the pond area and found several 9mm shell casings in the grass. These casings were similar to the one found near Christa's body. The police sent the casings to the state crime lab for analysis. The lab report confirmed that the gun Cudy used to shoot the turtles was the same gun used to shoot Christa. Investigators summoned Cudy to the police station for further questioning regarding his wife's death. He maintained that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Cudy explained that he had left for work at 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 28, 2008, and returned home the next morning at 6 a.m., providing an alibi that he was working throughout the night. Upon verification, Cudy's colleagues corroborated his claim, stating that he was indeed present at work all night. When inquired about the firearm, Cudy revealed that he owned a gun but claimed to have sold it the day prior to the incident to an unknown man named Steve. The alleged buyer had paid $500 in cash, which made verifying this claim difficult. According to Cudy, Steve was described as a white male in his mid-30s, around 6 feet 1 inch tall, driving an old Toyota pickup truck. Christa's parents shared their concerns with investigators, stating that they didn't believe Cudy's account of events. Her father, Winford Baker, noted that Cudy showed little emotional response to Christa's death, a behavior that had started a few months before their wedding. They had been experiencing financial difficulties since moving in together, and the impending arrival of their child was likely to add to their struggles. Christa's parents also suspected that Cudy was having an affair with a colleague, who had even attended their wedding. Christa had confided in friends just weeks before her death that she suspected Cudy was cheating on her. As investigators dug deeper into the marriage, they became increasingly convinced that Cudy and Christa had different visions for their future. However, was this enough motive for Cudy to take Christa's life, especially given that she was carrying their unborn child? The police had one lead, a man named Steve, who Cudy claimed had bought the gun used to kill Christa. Investigators set out to find Steve, using the description provided by Cudy. Meanwhile, they brought Cudy in for further questioning, asking him to provide a detailed account of his activities before, during, and after work on the day of Christa's death. This time, his story differed from his initial statement. The investigators found several inconsistencies in Cudy's story. He failed to mention a man named Steve, who was allegedly at his house, and to whom he had sold a gun. Additionally, while on duty, Cudy showed no concern for his pregnant wife Christa's well-being when she didn't answer his calls, despite knowing she was home alone. He could have asked a family member to check on her, but didn't. Furthermore, the crime scene appeared to have been staged, which raised suspicions about Cudy's involvement. As the investigators applied pressure, Cudy's story began to unravel. After several hours of interrogation, he changed his story entirely. He claimed that he had been sleeping on the couch before his night shift and that his wife had woken him up late. He stated that he wasn't angry with her for waking him up late and that it wasn't an issue. Cudy then explained that he had been walking around the house with a gun, intending to take it to work because a colleague was interested in buying it. He said he was fooling around, aiming the gun at objects and making click, click noises. He approached Christa from behind, put the gun to the back of her head, and claimed that an accidental shot occurred. He maintained that it was an accident and that he didn't intend to harm her. When he realized Christa was dead, he was scared and didn't know what to do. Cudy Alexander admitted to staging a crime scene to make it look like a robbery. He took several items from his house, including weapons and a DVD player, and drove to work with the front door left open. His plan was for someone to discover the open door and lights on, and then find his wife, Christa, while he was at work. However, this plan failed. On his way to work, Alexander threw a pistol and other items, including his wife's jewelry, out of the car window. By the time he arrived at work, the only items left in the car were a DVD player and a Sony radio. He gave the DVD player to a colleague, Allison Sharp, with whom he had been having an affair. Alexander and Sharp kissed and held hands before and after his wedding, spending one night at a Baton Rouge hotel. While his wife Christa was at church camp, he took Sharp to a hotel for a jacuzzi evening with fine china plates, meal and wine. Amidst supposed financial difficulties with his low salary of $11 per hour and stalled professional certification efforts, Cudy and his pregnant wife, Christa, were struggling financially and unemployed, and on top of that, their washing machine had broken. But Alexander managed to come up with money for a romantic evening at Callaway Inn with his mistress, Sharp. Police later determined that a shocking act unfolded in the home, contradicting Cudy's initial claim that Christa's death was accidental. Detectives found it difficult to prove direct involvement, but believed Cudy's explanation was suspicious. Despite the challenges, police were convinced that Christa's death was not an accident, and Cudy's actions raised more questions than answers. After the police arrested Cudy Alexander, Christa's parents were able to find the strength to forgive him. The Baker family came together to mourn the loss of their beloved daughter and what would have been their fourth grandchild. Christa's father, Winford Baker, remembered her fondly, saying, "She was a sweet and lovely person. Christa had made a significant impact on those around her, having completed 17 mission trips during her lifetime." Winford Baker recalled the conversation he had with Cudy shortly before his arrest. Although it was brief, Baker described the encounter as emotional, saying, "We hugged and cried together." Despite his desire for justice, Baker stated that he had already forgiven Cudy. "We forgave him even before we knew who was responsible," he said. Baker found comfort in knowing that Christa was now in a better place, saying, "She's with the Lord in heaven, and that peace." The trial started on August 2, 2009. Prosecutors claimed that Cudy's behavior after Christa's death implied that he had acted on purpose. They wondered why he didn't call 911 right away if the shooting was truly an accident. Instead, Cudy faked a robbery and left Christa's body for 12 hours before going home and calling 911. Also questioned Cudy's story that the shooting was accidental, noting that he was an experienced gun owner who had received proper training from his father. Cudy Alexander, 24, was charged with second-degree murder for the death of his wife, Christa. Cudy had admitted to being involved in her death, which he claimed was a result of his poor decision-making. After initially going to trial, Cudy suddenly changed his plea to guilty, ending jury deliberations. This unexpected turn of events came about when Christa's family agreed to a plea deal that had been proposed earlier. Alexander was sentenced to 55 years in prison in August 2009. The case of Anu Singh. A man named Sam, who lived with his wife and son in Melbourne, Australia, came to his home in the state of Kerala, India to visit his parents in October 2015. However, before returning to Melbourne, he told his parents and some relatives, "Maybe the next time I come to India, it will be in a coffin." Surprisingly, 3 days later, news arrived that Sam had died. Everyone wonders how someone could predict their own death. But when the true story came to light, 2 major cities in different countries were shaken. So what was the full story behind this case? Let's dive into the details. In 2015, a 34-year-old man named Sam Abraham lived with his wife, Sophia, and their 7-year-old son in Epping, a suburb of Melbourne, Australia. The family had previously lived in Oman, a country in West Asia, but they moved to Melbourne because it is considered the most livable city in Australia. Both Sam and Sophia were employed, and the small family of 3 was happily residing in Australia. Every year, Sam would visit his home in India with his family. In October 2015, Sam and Sophia took some days off from work and came to India. One day, Sam told his father, "I feel like I won't live for much longer. Maybe I will die soon." After hearing this, Sam's father gets angry and says, "You are so young. Why are you saying such strange things?" Despite this, one day Sam tells some of his relatives, "Maybe the next time I come to India, it will be in a coffin." This remark also seems strange to them, but everyone brushed it off as a joke. Sam had a flight back to Australia on October 11th, 2015, as he and his wife had taken only a few days off from work to visit India. After this, Sam returns to Australia with his wife and son. However, just 2 days later, on the morning of October 15th, 2015, Sam's father, Abraham, receives a call on the other end of the line from his daughter-in-law, Sophia, who delivers devastating news that shocked the entire Abraham family. Through tears, Sophia explains that Sam had passed away that morning due to a heart attack. Sophia, left alone in Australia, handles all the paperwork and finally gets permission to send Sam's body back to India. This process takes 2 to 3 days. And on October 18th, Sam's body arrives in Kerala, India. Along with Sam's dead body, Sophia, their 7-year-old son, and Sophia's sister, Sonia, also come to India. However, some of Sam's relatives, especially his father, are deeply shocked because everything Sam had said came true. The house is engulfed in grief. Sam's wife is now a widow, and their 7-year-old son has lost his father. With a heavy heart and deep sorrow, Sam's body was buried, and his last rites were performed. Everyone at home was very sad, especially Sophia, whose life had taken a huge blow. Despite this, she had to return to Australia after 5 days because they had come to India on leave from their respective jobs. If Sophia had stayed in India longer, she could have lost her job. Therefore, on October 23rd, Sophia went back to Australia with her sister Sonia and her son. However, after returning to Australia, Sophia called her in-laws every Saturday to check on how they were doing. Time passed slowly, but there wasn't a single Saturday when Sophia didn't call her in-laws. But then, suddenly, in the July or the August 2016, there were no calls from Sophia to India. Seeing this, Sam's family became very worried, so they called some acquaintances in Australia to get information about Sophia. What Sam's family found out was shocking. They learned that Sophia had been in the custody of the Victoria Police for the past 15 to 20 days. Additionally, Sam's family found out that Sophia was charged with murder because the police suspected that she had killed her own husband, Sam Abraham. After this revelation, Sam's family is left stunned. However, the name of another man, Aaron Kamalasanan, comes up in the story. Sam's family heard this name for the first time, and it was then that they learned whether the accusations against Sophia were true or false. On the other hand, the Victoria Police presented some evidence to Sophia and Aaron, after which both confessed to murdering Sam. Following this confession, Sophia tells the police a story that leaves them astonished. The story goes like this. In the Coleman district of the state of Kerala, there is a small village named Cavalier, where Sophia and Sam lived. In this vast state of Kerala, Cavalier is just a small village where Sam and Sophia's houses were close to each other. They knew each other since childhood because they went to school together and were in the same class. Additionally, they both had a bit of interest in music, so they sang together in the church's choir group. Not only that, but after completing high school, they also joined college together. Eventually, they fell in love during their college days and started spending their time together like a normal college couple. However, in their relationship, Sophia fell in love with another guy named Oren. Sophia neither let Sam know about Oren, nor let Oren know about Sam. But in the end, Sophia decided to marry Sam. After that, Sam first informed his family that he liked Sophia and wanted to marry her. However, Sam was standing shocked when his father said that he couldn't marry Sophia. Although Sophia's father was a retired defense officer, and Sophia's family was respectable in society, Sam's father still refused the marriage. For when Sam's family learned of this, they took the matter seriously and decided to let Sam and Sophia get married. Afterward, both Sam and Sophia were very happy, and their wedding was celebrated with great enthusiasm. They got married in February 2008, and in February 2009, Sam moved to Oman with his wife, Sophia, because he had gotten a job at a money exchange company. However, when Sophia became pregnant, She returned to India because she needed her family's support. At that time, she gave birth to a son in India. And while staying in India, she was in constant contact with her sister. After some time, Sophia decided to move to Australia for a better life. Sophia had an MSc degree in electronics, so her sister also encouraged her, saying she should come to Australia as she would get a great job. After seeing Sophia's resume, a company in Melbourne, he talked to his company and got his transfer to Australia. Sam reached Australia in 2013, and their small family of 3 now lives under the same roof. The plus point of living here was that their son had grown up and both husband and wife were working in different companies, so everything was going well in their lives. However, there was a different story behind this. Before Sophia moved to Australia, Oran had already gone there to Melbourne. Oran started working as an instrumentation engineer at a company. Oran got married there and also had a child by then. Sophia was also married and Oran had his own family, so they should not have been in contact with each other. But despite being married, Sophia and Oran continued to talk through chatting apps and calls. In fact, Sophia's main reason for moving to Australia was that Oran was there and they could meet in person. But when Sam joined his family in Australia, it became difficult for Sophia and Oran to meet. Despite this, Sophia continued to talk to Oran secretly. One day, Sophia had the idea that if Sam were to die somehow, she could be with Oran. She shared this idea with Oran, and he liked it because he loved Sophia deeply. After that, Oran started looking for an opportunity to kill Sam. During this time, he kept a close watch on Sam's every activity, and Sophia helped him with this. Then, in February 2015, Oran finally got the chance he was waiting for. One day in February, Sam was sitting in his car, parked outside a metro station. During this time, a masked Oran approached him and attacked him with a knife, slashing his throat and cheek. However, Sam survived the attack. And fortunately for Oran, he was not identified by the police and therefore was not caught. When Sam came home after surviving the knife attack, Sophia told Oran about it. The two then began to think of another way to kill Sam easily. They came up with many ideas on how to kill Sam, but they finally decided to use cyanide. They then started looking for cyanide, and on October 14th, Sophia mixed cyanide into Sam's orange juice and gave it to him. Sam, thinking it was just normal orange juice, drank it. Later, he lay down on his bed, but the poor Sam never got up again. Then, Sophia immediately messaged Aaron and called him to her house. The first thing Aaron checked was whether Sam was alive or dead. To make sure, Aaron forcibly poured the remaining juice from the glass into Sam's mouth. After doing this and seeing Sam, Aaron realized he was dead and left Sophia's house. Afterward, Sophia slept the whole night on the same bed with her son, where her husband's dead body was lying. As soon as morning came, she started crying loudly. And hearing Sophia's cries, some neighbors came to her house. Sam was then taken to the hospital, but upon arrival, the doctor declared him dead. On hearing this, Sophia started crying a lot, but it was all an act. During this time, Sophia called Sam's father and told him that Sam had died of a heart attack. Whenever anyone asked Sophia the cause of Sam's death, she would say they all went to sleep after dinner. But when she tried to wake Sam up in the morning, he wouldn't get up. Maybe he had a silent attack. After this, no one suspected anything, and Sophia quickly began arranging to take Sam's dead body to India. She likely knew that if an autopsy was conducted here, the cause of death would be clearly determined. Therefore, the doctors believed Sophia's story and recorded the cause of death as a heart attack in their report. And within 3 days, Sam's dead body reached India. Now, in India, no one in Sam's family suspected Sophia because she was crying a lot at Sam's funeral, which made everyone think that she was very sad about Sam's passing. There is a team of 5 people who work hard to bring you the best quality content through thorough research. If you appreciate our efforts, you can support us according to your preference by visiting the link provided in the description. Your small support will motivate us to work effectively on the channel. Thank you. Now let's continue with the story. Sam's toxicology report revealed that there was cyanide in his blood and liver, causing his death. About 10 months after Sam's death, on August 12, 2016, the Victoria police arrived at Sophia and Aaron's house to arrest them. However, during the search of Sophia's house, the police found a diary. But the diary was written in Malayalam, a language spoken and written in Kerala, so the police sent it to be translated. Afterward, the trial of this case began, and then the police presented Sophia and Aaron's call recordings. Some of their chats, Sophia's diary translated into English, and Aaron's recording before the judge. This was the same recording in which Aaron had told the detective that he had committed a murder by poisoning a man. According to a Melbourne-based newspaper, the diary found at Sophia's house sometimes belonged to Sophia and sometimes to both of them, and they used to write their feelings in this diary. One entry in this diary by Sophia says, "Can you hold me tight? I want to drift away in your love." In addition, Aaron had also written, "She is the best match for me, but what to do? I am sure that one day she will be mine." After this, the Supreme Court of Victoria delivered its verdict. Aaron is sentenced to 24 years, during which he will not be eligible for parole before 21 years. On the other hand, Sophia is sentenced to 22 years, during which she cannot be paroled before 18 years. However, during this trial, Sophia broke down in court and said, "I have a small son, so please reduce my sentence." But then the judge remarked, "The unfortunate part is that the biggest victim in this crime is your son because you killed his father and now you are also going to be sentenced." After that, the court awarded custody of the child to Sophia's sister, Sonia. But later, Sam's family demanded to keep their grandson with them. And now Sam's son lives with his grandparents' family. However, there is no information about Aaron's wife and his child in this case, so we cannot say anything about them. During this time, neither Aaron's family nor Sophia's parents seem to have any hint that they know each other. So with that, the Sam Abraham murder case comes to an end. The case of Jessica Bardwell. A team of detectives and FBI agents visited a remote ranch in Farmersville, North Texas in the evening, and they immediately began searching the wooded area. They soon found a piece of metal covering something, and nearby, there was an overwhelming smell of decay. Although the smell was unbearable, the officers were prepared for what they might find. When they removed the metal, they found a female body wrapped in a blue sheet, covered with a blanket, and 2 red and gold towels stained with blood. A pile of trash mixed with dirt served as a makeshift grave for the victim. It was clear that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as their attempts to hide the body only made it more noticeable. The condition of the body was terrible, having decomposed significantly under the scorching sun for a week. It took experts 7 days to officially identify the victim, and they did so by requesting dental records of the presumed victim. The investigation suggested that the discovered body belonged to 27-year-old Jessica Bardwell. The examination revealed that her death was the result of a crime, but the exact cause could not be determined due to the body's advanced decomposition. Notably, an anonymous informant provided crucial information that led to the discovery of the body, but their identity was not disclosed. Jessica Bardwell, a beloved daughter and friend, had seemingly vanished from the home she shared with her boyfriend, Jason Lowe. Her father, Gary, sensed trouble and set out from Mississippi to Texas to search for her, following his instincts that she was in danger. Let's start from the beginning. Gary had an exceptionally strong bond with his daughter, Jessica. He recalled being deeply moved when she was born on September 10, 1988 in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Gary and Carla Bardwell were wonderful parents to Jessica and her older brother, Brandon. The siblings got along well, with Brandon always protecting his little sister from bullies. Their grandmother, Kitty, who adored her grandchildren, would often visit and engage in fun activities with them, such as reading books, sharing life stories, and playing games. In short, they were a quintessential American family. Jessica was a happy and kind girl with a unique style. She dreamed of working in the beauty industry and opening her own salon. When she was 14, her parents got divorced, and she chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. Gary, a firefighter, remarried Gina, who was an excellent homemaker and took good care of Jessica. As Jessica grew up, she wanted to be independent and moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, where she worked as a waitress at Cobalt Restaurant. She kept in touch with her father, who would visit her and take her boating and fishing. Jessica's friend and restaurant manager, Kimberly, admired the strong bond between Jessica and her father. At Cobalt, Jessica met Terry, and they started dating. However, she soon fell for Jason, a friend of Terry's, and left him for Jason. This new relationship turned her life around, and Jason promised to help her achieve her dreams. He got a job in Dallas, Texas, and Jessica followed him without telling her father, afraid of disappointing him. In Dallas, Jessica searched for a new job and looked for a location for her salon. She and Jason planned to get married and buy a house. However, her relationship with her father suffered, and she stopped answering his calls. Gary was worried and eventually found out about Jason and Jessica's move. He tried to reestablish contact, but discovered that Jason controlled all communications. Months later, Jessica contacted her father, and he met Jason when they visited Pascagoula. Gary disliked Jason and tried to convince Jessica not to return to Texas, but she insisted on following her dreams. Despite Gary's concerns, Jessica seemed happy and didn't show any signs of distress. Gary's fatherly instincts kicked in after meeting his daughter's boyfriend, Jason, prompting him to write a song titled Taken for his daughter. Unfortunately, his concerns proved justified. For months after Jessica moved to Texas, she suddenly stopped responding to her family's calls. The final straw came on May 8th when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a gesture uncharacteristic of her. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong, especially since she missed a cherished family holiday. He immediately called Jason, who claimed he didn't know Jessica's whereabouts, citing their open relationship as the reason. However, Gary knew this was a lie as Jason controlled every aspect of Jessica's life. The next morning, Gary drove to Texas, suspecting Jason's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. He messaged Jason, warning him that he would face consequences if Jessica wasn't home when he arrived. Upon reaching their apartment, Gary found no trace of Jessica or her belongings, but Jason continued to feign ignorance. Later, Kimberly shared disturbing details about Jessica's relationship with Jason. He had wasted money on drugs and entertainment, and his promises to help Jessica achieve her dreams had vanished. In private, Jason was rude and aggressive, leading to frequent conflicts with Jessica. With Jessica still missing, Gary filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. Detective Huron Hall, a father of 3 daughters, led the investigation into her disappearance. The police spoke with Jason several times, inspecting the house, but found no trace of Jessica. Jason claimed he last saw Jessica on May 8th, leaving without explanation, possibly to visit her parents. However, investigators discovered that Jessica had actually sold her car 3 weeks earlier, a fact Jason knew about since he was present at the sale. This raised suspicions, prompting the police to interrogate him again on May 12th. During the investigation, police found cocaine in Jason's kitchen and a suspicious substance in his garage. The Audi car inside the garage had mud stains and a detached bumper. Although the car was empty, the police suspected Jessica might be inside. The smell of decomposition led them to examine the trunk where they found blood stains. Jason claimed he got stuck in the mud while searching for Jessica, but he couldn't explain the blood in the car or the cocaine in his home. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified as a homicide to prevent Jason from fleeing. Despite the lack of a body, the police charged Jason with homicide, and the search for Jessica continued. Eventually, her body was found, and the autopsy report revealed that she had been brutally discarded. A year later, Jason claimed the incident was an accident and hoped for the jury's understanding. However, the prosecution faced challenges in building their case, and the defense staged a mock trial that resulted in a not guilty verdict. After Jason revealed the location of Jessica's body, he received a shorter prison sentence, allowing her family to give her a dignified burial. Jessica's father, Gary, was consumed by grief and anger, seeking justice in a unique way. He took a photo of Jason, placed it on a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer, finding some small comfort in this form of emotional release. Gary struggled to cope with his loss, feeling guilty for not persuading Jessica to stay away from her controlling boyfriend, Jason. He had hoped she would break up with him, but she had chosen to give him another chance instead. During the trial, Gary replayed their last conversations in his mind, including a call from Jessica when she admitted he was right about Jason after an argument. Although she had briefly found shelter with a friend, she had returned to Jason the next day. Gary had reluctantly accepted her decision, a choice he would later regret deeply. When Mr. Bardwell arrived in Texas, he was determined to seek justice. During her opening statement, prosecutor Cynthia Walker described Jason as a complex person who few people wanted to associate with due to his history of substance abuse, which often triggered violent outbursts. It's possible that Jessica was a victim of one such episode. Prosecutor Wes Wynn called upon Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They corroborated the prosecution's claims, sharing their own fears of Jason's aggression, which was fueled by jealousy. Like Jessica, Jason had isolated them from their loved ones and exhibited manipulative and deceitful behavior. These traits ultimately led each of them to end their relationships with him, which required careful planning and caution. However, Jason was able to present himself as a superior individual to many people, deceiving them about his true nature. In response to the allegations, Jason revealed that he had started using drugs at the age of 13, influenced by his friends, which led to addiction. Despite his struggles, he managed to earn multiple degrees and secure a job with a well-known global company, demonstrating his determination to not let his addiction define him. Jason admitted to planning to fulfill Jessica's dream of building a family together, motivated by his love for her. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason, contradicting his claims. The investigation revealed that Jessica died between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day she argued with her neighbors, the Jordans, and was last seen alive. After the argument, Jason moved Jessica's body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it stayed for several days. Forensic evidence confirmed that the blood found in the Audi belonged to Jessica. Jason then transported her body to a remote farm and hid it in the nearby woods. The sheet used to wrap the body was later found to be part of Jessica's bedding set, which Jason still had in his home despite Jessica's death and her body decomposing in the car. After Jessica's death, the accused continued to see multiple women, and his phone contained evidence of this, including flirtatious messages and intimate photos that he had sent to them before meeting them at his apartment. Jason claimed that he was trying to distract himself from his emotional pain and guilty feelings by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. The investigation discovered Jason's presence at Jessica's time of death through a clever tactic. Because Jason had consistently denied any involvement, detectives asked Tommy Jordan, someone who knew Jason, to have a conversation with him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason finally admitted to making a terrible mistake with Jessica, expressing guilt and remorse, although he only acknowledged culpability for criminal negligence. Jason's statement to the police was seen as a confession, and they realized they had caught him. Jason made a deal with the prosecution and revealed the location of Jessica's body. At the trial, he finally told his side of the story. According to Jason, he and Jessica had taken libido-enhancing pills that evening and got intimate in the shower. During the shower, Jason slipped and Jessica fell, hitting her head on the bathtub. She complained of feeling hot and dizzy and sat down. Jason claimed he offered to call an ambulance, but Jessica refused, saying she just needed to rest and sleep. However, the next morning, Jason found her lying on his chest, unconscious and not breathing. Despite his attempts to revive her, Jessica was dead. Scared of being accused of murder, Jason hesitated to call the police and decided to take matters into his own hands. He initially left the body in his car and later hid it on a remote farm, carelessly dumping her in a pile of trash without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was not believable due to his questionable character and the medical examination findings. The autopsy revealed that Jessica had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have resulted from just falling in the shower, indicating that Jason had attempted to cover up evidence of physical abuse. As a result, his entire story was proven to be a fabrication. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason Lowe to 50 years in prison, a reduced term due to a plea deal with the prosecution. Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least February 1941. At the sentencing, Gary, Jessica's father, felt relieved that justice had been served, but was disturbed by Jason's lack of remorse. Two of Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the sentencing. Chambers expressed sympathy for Jessica, warning her to get out of the relationship if she could. Even now, Jason maintains his innocence, claiming the homicide was an accident. Unfortunately, Jessica didn't recognize Jason's true nature until it was too late. She had grown up with a positive male role model in her father Gary and didn't realize that some men can be deceitful and violent. This tragic story serves as a warning to women to prioritize their own safety, freedom, and well-being, lest they suffer a devastating fate, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. The case of Els van Doren. Els van Doren, a 38-year-old woman from Belgium, was married to a jewelry craftsman named Jan de Wilde. They had 2 children, Vincent de Wilde and Carol de Wilde. Although she worked in the family's jewelry store, Van Doren's real passion was skydiving. She started skydiving with her husband in 1994, and her enthusiasm for the sport grew over time. With 2,300 jumps to her name, she became an experienced skydiver. Every weekend and on holidays, she dedicated her time to skydiving. In 1998, Van Doren started formation jumping and joined an all-female skydiving team, the Divas, in February 2001. They even competed in the World Skydiving Championships in February 2003. Unfortunately, Van Doren had to leave the group in February 2004 because of health problems related to a hernia. After she got better, she decided to skydive for fun instead of competition. She became a member of the Swartberg Parachute Club, and by February 2006, she had completed over 2,300 successful jumps. It was in this club where she became close friends with another skydiver, a 26-year-old school teacher named Van Doren Klopmans. Because they both had the same first name, Van Doren later came up with the nickname Babs for her younger friend to avoid any confusion. Another member of the club, a man named Marcel Summers, was also friends with both women. The 3 of them became good friends and started diving together during their skydiving tricks. Over time, Van Doren grew closer to Marcel, despite being married. Their friendship turned into a romantic involvement. Van Doren family was accustomed to her spending weekends at the skydiving club, which unknowingly helped her conceal her relationship with Marcel from her husband. They would often visit Marcel's apartment, spending their weekends together without any worry. Van Doren was unaware that she and Klopmans not only shared a first name, but also the same man. Without either woman knowing, Marcel had been secretly involved with both of them intimately to juggle both relationships. He created a schedule, assigning specific days for each woman. Fridays were for Klopmans, while Saturdays were for Van Doren. This setup worked well for Marcel for a while, but it wouldn't last long as an unexpected turn of events was on the horizon. On a particular weekend, on the evening of Friday, November 10, 2006, Klopmans went to Marcel's place as they usually did every week. Little did she know, Els van Doren had decided to surprise Marcel by showing up unexpectedly that same night. Klopmans and Marcel were having dinner together when they returned to Marcel's apartment and found Van Doren waiting outside his door. The details of their subsequent conversation are unknown, but what is certain is that on that night, Klopmans did not share Marcel's bed. Instead, she ended up sleeping in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, while Van Doren and Marcel went to the bedroom. There, in the living room, Klopmans noticed Van Doren's parachute and other skydiving gear in close proximity. Feeling wounded and betrayed after being deceived and replaced by her friend, Klopmans resorted to an unthinkable action, which led to a tragic outcome. Later on November 18, 2006, 12 members of the skydiving club, including Van Doren, Klopmans, and Marcel, embarked on a flight over Flanders. The plan involved Van Doren, Klopmans, Marcel, and another skydiver named Tom executing a 4-person formation jump at 13,000 feet. During this formation, they would interlock hands before releasing and deploying their parachutes as they prepared for the jump. Marcel and Tom leaped from the plane as intended. However, it seemed that Coleman's, perhaps due to a delay or intentionally, jumped slightly later than the others. During the freefall, Coleman's was not able to catch up with the group, and at 9,000 feet, Marcel, Van Doren, and Tom broke the formation, preparing to safely open their parachutes. At this point, it became clear that a serious problem had arisen. As Van Doren tried to activate her parachute by pulling the cords, it failed to open. Striving to stay calm, she recalled the emergency procedures from her training, and having dealt with a malfunctioning parachute before, she had successfully deployed the reserve parachute on that previous occasion. However, in this situation, plummeting through the air at around 200 kilometers per hour, she had only 20 seconds or less to perform a life-saving maneuver for a successful landing. Despite her efforts, pulling the reserve cord proved futile as the parachute remained unresponsive. With her desperation escalating, she persisted in tugging at both the main parachute and reserve cords, yet no response ensued. Marcel, who was 800 meters above, observed Van Doren, who was a mere 500 meters from the ground, and sensed that something was wrong as her parachute had still not been deployed. But he could do nothing but witness the unfolding horror. In the second desperate attempt, Van Doren tried to undo the cords of the parachute, hoping to activate it, but her fate had already been sealed. At the same time, in the town of Upap, as these events were unfolding, a woman was outside doing laundry in her garden. A loud noise alerted her to what had happened, and looking up, she saw a person descending from the sky with a parachute towards her garden. This spectacle wasn't unfamiliar, given that her residence was merely a few kilometers from the skydiving club and its landing field. While turning to resume her laundry task, the woman spotted a white fabric entangled on top of her shrubs. Drawing closer, she saw a person lying amidst the bushes. Swiftly, she called her husband, who was also in the garden attending to maintenance duties, and they promptly contacted emergency services. That person was Elvin Doran. They assumed she was one of the skydivers, but unfortunately, she showed no signs of life. Meanwhile, Marcel found a safe landing spot and ran through the streets, desperately calling out for Van Doren and trying to locate her. Marcel spotted an ambulance and followed it to the nearby site where Van Doren had landed. He rushed towards her, but had to be restrained to allow the emergency crew to approach. Upon the arrival of emergency services, resuscitation efforts were initiated but proved futile. Els Van Doren had succumbed. Marcel vehemently insisted on preserving Van Doren's parachute untouched, asserting the abnormality of both the main and reserve parachutes failing to open. He then contacted her husband, Jan, and delivered the devastating news. Jan hurried to his wife's side while Tom and Clotterman returned to the parachute club to relay the tragic news of Van Doren's demise to the other members. The club members were deeply affected by the news. Clotterman's, feeling overwhelmed, knelt down and let out a sorrowful cry. Elsa's husband, Yen, came to the club to collect her things and found Clotman's there. She offered to get the items, and he noticed her standing still with a strange smile. Clotman's then went towards the changing rooms with Yen following behind. But when they reached there, she suddenly closed the door, locking Yen outside. Yen later mentioned that Clotman's took a while before finally coming out with Van Doren's belongings. Meanwhile, at the accident site, the police had gathered Van Doren's parachute and helmet, the latter equipped with a video camera capturing her ill-fated jump. An autopsy conducted to ascertain her state revealed no traces of alcohol or drugs that might have impaired her. Her death was classified as either a murder or a suicide, attributed to multiple fractures and internal bleeding resulting from the impact of the fall. Suspicions arose within Van Doren's family, pointing toward the possibility of her being murdered by someone within her skydiving club, an individual knowledgeable about how parachutes work. Subsequently, the club members were advised not to attend her funeral, a request that some members, including Van Doren Clotman's, ignored. Yen, in particular, felt deeply hurt, learning that fellow club members were aware of the affair, some of whom he considered friends from his own club membership. To make things worse, Van Doren had falsely told her club friends that she was separated from her husband. Her funeral took place just a day before her daughter Carol's 15th birthday. During this sad occasion, Carol talked to her mother with a heartfelt statement. She mentioned how the family had asked her mother many times to stop skydiving and expressed how much they wanted her to stay with them. After the concerns about Van Doren's reserve parachute failing, the police started investigating shortly after the funeral. They brought in a parachuting specialist who knew a lot about parachutes to examine Van Doren's parachute and look for any problems. The expert quickly noticed a major issue. A crucial part of her parachute, the pilot chute, was missing. This small extra parachute is important for deploying either the main or reserve parachute. Its intentional removal seemed to be on purpose. Also, there were clear signs of tampering, such as the cut drawing to the pilot chute that activates the main parachute, and one of the straps connected to the emergency parachute. After reviewing the latest body camera footage from Van Doren's failed jump, investigators noticed an unidentified red fabric in front of her face that did not belong to her skydiving equipment. They are still trying to determine where this fabric came from and have asked the residents to search their gardens and surrounding areas for the red item. If found, they stressed the importance of handling it carefully, as it could contain DNA from the person who tampered with Van Doren's parachute. Sadly, no one has been able to find this key piece of evidence. On the Monday following Van Doren's tragic demise, a remarkable discovery came to light as the pilot chute was mysteriously found by Clothmans. She claimed that on her way back from Marcel's apartment, she spotted the chute hanging from a tree during her journey between Oaklab and Gank. Instead of contacting the police directly, Clothmans decided to inform Marcel of her find. Upon learning of the discovery, Marcel called the police, who promptly went to the site of the tree. Upon their arrival, the police encountered a nervous, troubled, and visibly emotional Clothmans. However, their suspicions were aroused regarding Clothmans's miraculous discovery of the pilot chute. She claimed that it was purely coincidental, attributing it to her decision to take a different route home that day compared to her usual journey, being stuck behind a slow-moving tractor that led her to glance upward, where she spotted the chute dangling around 20 meters above. The police, however, remained skeptical, as the fact that the pilot chute was missing was known only to the investigators at that point. At this point, the primary suspects implicated in the presumed murder of Van Doren were her husband Jan, her lover Marcel, and her friend Clothmans. Police conducted searches at Marcel's residence and later cleared him as a suspect. Van Doren's husband, Jan, was also later cleared as a suspect by the authorities. The investigative efforts extended to Clothman's home, where the police confiscated items such as her phone, laptop, and a diary documenting her emotions, as per her psychiatrist's recommendation. Clothmans was later called in for questioning at the police station in an attempt to gather more information about her relationships with Marcel Van Doren and the circumstances surrounding Van Doren's death. Throughout the interrogation, Clothmans firmly denied any involvement in tampering with Van Doren's parachute, and instead tried to shift the blame either onto Marcel, suggesting he had kept Van Doren's equipment during her weekend visits, or onto her husband, Jan, with whom she allegedly stored her own equipment during the weekdays. After initial questioning, Clothmans was released and went home. However, she failed to appear for a second interview scheduled for December 20th, 2006. It was later discovered that she had tried to take her own life that morning by overdosing on sleeping pills and antidepressants. Her mother, Clothmans, found her unresponsive and rushed her to the hospital for emergency treatment. Clothmans wrote to her loved ones about her struggles with grief after losing her close friend and the immense stress of being a murder suspect. After her recovery, she spent 15 days in a psychiatric facility where she was closely monitored. She had previously been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression. This was not Clothman's first attempt to harm herself. Marcel, who had distanced himself from her, believed her actions were a ploy to get attention and not a genuine attempt to end her life. Marcel thought she had deliberately taken the pills just before her mother was due to return, suggesting that her main aim was to shift the focus away from her possible involvement in Van Doren's death. Marcel assumed the police were closing in on her and catching her in her own lies. After receiving psychiatric care, Clothmans was arrested on January 11th, 2007 on suspicion of murdering Van Doren. During her court appearance on January 19, 2007, the judge decided to keep her in custody while the investigation continued. Although asked to take a polygraph test, Clothmans refused, and the test was never administered. Further investigation into Els Van Doren's skydiving equipment revealed that someone had deliberately cut the parachute cords using scissors, likely with their right hand. By March 2007, Kloopmans had spent 3 months in prison, undergoing intense questioning without confessing. However, she did admit to sending an anonymous letter to Van Doren, criticizing her for neglecting her family due to her frequent skydiving. Van Doren's partner, Yen, had found the letter but dismissed it as a criticism of Van Doren's absence from her family. It later became clear that Kloopmans intended the letter as a warning to Van Doren to end her involvement with Marcel. Additionally, Kloopmans confessed to making anonymous calls to Marcel, timing them when she knew he was with Van Doren in an attempt to intimidate them. Upon examining Kloopmans' automatic activation device, investigators found that she had jumped later than the rest of the team and opened her parachute earlier. They speculated that this gave her a better view of the events unfolding from above. In September 2008, Claude's lawyer managed to get her released on bail. And despite the ongoing investigation, she went back to working at a school. The trial for murder started on September 24, 2010, with the prosecution being very confident that they had enough evidence to convict Kloopmans of murder. The reason for the murder, according to the prosecution, was that Kloopmans was jealous because she found out her lover, Marcel, was in a relationship with her close friend, Van Doren. Earlier, Kloopmans had told investigators that she knew she came second to Van Doren in Marcel's eyes. She admitted that Marcel clearly preferred Van Doren over her. The prosecution argued that this led to a strong motive for the alleged murder, as Kloopmans desperately wanted to get rid of her romantic rival, Van Doren. Kloopmans' defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case relied entirely on circumstantial evidence and unproven accusations. During her testimony, Kloopmans claimed she had no long-term plans with Marcel and only got intimately involved with him because of her low self-esteem. At one point, she even tried to shift the blame to Carol Van Doren's daughter, suggesting that she might have wanted revenge against her mother for being away most weekends. Despite her attempts to sway the jury and deflect blame, they ultimately found her guilty of murdering her friend, Els Van Doren, on October 20, 2010, and she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. During her trial, Kloopmans consistently maintained her claim of innocence. To prevent her from harming herself again, she was closely monitored. Later, she filed an appeal, arguing that the police had questioned her without her lawyer present in May 2011. However, her appeal was denied. Nevertheless, after serving 12.5 years in prison, Kloopmans was granted conditional release in June 2022, following a third appeal, and is now a free woman. We feel deeply sorry for what happened to Els Van Doren and her family, who had to endure so much after the truth was revealed. Our heartfelt condolences go to her loved ones who are grieving the loss of her life. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.